It blows my mind. So I would spend time going to my workshops with doing some design thinking exercises on, okay, what are our goals? And it's quite interesting when you get a group of people to sit together in a room, or, I love to use Miro with post-it notes, and you get them to write down what are the goals for this project, and everyone will have a different view about what the goals are. Yes.
G'day and welcome to Amazing Apps. I'm your host, Microsoft MVP, Neil Benson. I'm on a mission to help you master agile practices, build amazing apps on the Microsoft Power Platform and Dynamics 365. Amazing Apps is the result of my curiosity and experiments with new ways of building amazing business apps and high-performing teams. It's full of advice from my guests, like Hamish today, and examples from some of my work over the last few years leading business applications teams and practices. If you enjoyed this episode, head over to amazingapps.show for additional resources. You'll also find more episodes of Amazing Apps, as well as videos, free workshops, ebooks, and my online training courses. Hamish Sheild is a Power Platform consultant and specialises in applying design thinking practices to our apps and projects to make them more human-centred. Hamish and I discuss the different activities and artifacts we've experimented with before launching the delivery phase of our Power Platform and Dynamics 365 projects. Hamish calls it Sprint Zero. I call it the discovery phase. And I'm not saying Hamish is completely wrong to call it Sprint Zero, but he didn't call it that. It'd be more correct, and I'd be a happier podcast host. What do you say, Hamish? We dive into goal setting, whether or not developers should be included in discovery work, the value of day in the life sessions, design sprints, customer journey maps and user journey maps, user story maps, prototyping, solution blueprints from the Dynamics 365 Success by Design Guide, the size of your refined portion of the initial product backlog, establishing environments, business process mapping, and stakeholder maps. That's a lot, hey? If you've ever been involved in initiating a new project, I think you'll find this a fascinating conversation. Strap yourself in. Here's Hamish Sheild. Thanks. Hey Hamish, how have you been?
Good, thanks, Neil. Thank you for having me on the show again.
Oh, it's a pleasure having you back. You're going to MVP Summit next month. We're going to see you there.
Yes, yeah, I am. My first MVP Summit, so looking forward to that. Yeah, meeting people in person will be nice. Yeah,
I've been quite a few times, I have to admit. I'm really looking forward to going back. It's always a pleasure. But yeah, first time, it's got to be a special experience. So yeah, it'd be great to see you there. It's been a long time since we caught up in person. So
that's right.
Thanks very much for joining me on Amazing Apps. I would love to pick your brains. You're like a world-renowned expert authority on design thinking, but I think more broadly than that, on all the stuff that we can do to launch an amazing project. When we turn up, day one, sprint one, what's the prep work that a team, whether you're a customer team or a partner team, what should you do? What can you do to prepare for delivery? My group at Superware, we have a discovery phase. I try not to call it Sprint Zero, but we do a bit of discovery to prepare the backlog, prepare the environments and ALM and get some of the technical stuff set up. But I'd love to find out from you what you've seen work really well in getting ready to launch.
From my point of view, I've been doing quite a bit of work on this more recently, the last couple of years, around how do you get yourself set up, because you do end up in these big discovery phases, right? And you either do it as part of your pre-sales, which is quite expensive, or you do it as part of a pre-sold engagement for discovery, and that ends up being expensive, and the client doesn't actually get anything out at the end of it. They get a bit of paper with a plan and some estimates and a statement of work, right? Yeah. So, and that can become quite expensive and quite annoying for the client. So I think, you and I obviously are probably quite similar mindsets, right? I've taken an agile approach, but I think in terms of getting set up before you start building or getting into your a rhythm of sprints, is I kind of like three things that I do at the start. One is to have, I guess, the goal, or the sponsor or whoever's responsible for the project on the business side, to set the goal. Like, what are the goals, and then also behind that, like, what metrics do you want to measure as well, right? So you've got something quite concrete to aim towards. I think that's really important, and often that kind of gets missed. I think we need to our goal is to put in a CRM system. Our goal is to put in an app. That's not the goal. There is something else behind that, right?
No,
And so you need to dig.
I had an RFP this week. I was like, the goals of this project are to implement a new marketing system, implement a new CRM, and implement a new website. Like, what do you want those things to do? And how are you going to measure success? Oh, I don't know.
Exactly. It blows my mind. So I would spend time, going to our workshops or doing some design thinking exercises on, okay, what are our goals? And it's quite interesting when you get a group of people to sit together in a room, or, I love to use Miro with Post-it notes, and you get them to write down what are the goals for this project, and everyone will have a different view about what the goals are. Some people will be, it's to implement a CRM system. Others will be more business focused.
Yeah.
And so you should get everyone to align first on, okay, well, what's the real goal? And usually, that's what the sponsor should be signing off on, right, as well.
I find metrics ideal for that. This is the outcome we're trying to nudge from here to here. But quite often, they need a new system because the old way of working doesn't have any metrics. And it's kind of astounding, but I don't even know is it worth investing in some baselining to figure those baseline metrics out, or do we just go for it and measure the outcomes afterwards? And have that's quite a difficult spot to be in.
It's a hard one, right? Yeah, I actually have had clients before where you've tried, a customer service application, for example, is a classic one, and you want to measure customer satisfaction scores or your NPS, but they're not even doing that. Right. So you don't even have a baseline. So the goals for the project would literally be able to measure our performance, and then once we've got that measurement in place, then how do we use the system to improve our score later on? So I think it's okay not to have metrics, but you need to have something to kind of aim towards, right, other than just putting in a system. Yeah.
And the classic one I've seen is we want a CRM system to shorten our sales cycle, from average close of 89 days down to 45 days. But your customer on the other side isn't going to go, I'll tell you what, I'll make a faster decision because you're using Dynamics 365 really well. Sales cycles just sometimes take a certain length of time. And the whiz-bang CRM system that you're using internally isn't going to impact that. So you really have to find a metric that can be impacted by the system. And those are sometimes not obvious. Okay, so you've maybe in the weeks or months before you start delivery, you've sat down with your project sponsor, you've agreed a goal, maybe a couple of metrics to support that goal. What else? What's next? Do you like to sit down a one-on-one, for example, with the I'm going to say a product owner, product sponsor, or do you make that a more collaborative goal-setting event with other people, other stakeholders involved?
Often, it's good to have one-on-one interviews because people can kind of open up a bit more, right? And they're not watched by everyone else in the room. And so I think someone with the project sponsor or the product owner or whoever that person is ultimately responsible, sit down with them and have a one-on-one. But I'll probably leave my one-on-one interviews with users until you start getting into I guess sprint one or onwards. But then I think it is important to do both, right? Have a workshop as well where everyone to say, write on a sticky note, what do you think the goals of the project are? And get everyone aligned on, there'll be all these different types of goals. And so, okay, let's vote on which goals are the most, do you think we actually are aiming towards? Project sponsor kind of chips in and goes, yep, this is the right one. So everyone's on the same page, I think is really important to start the project off. And that workshop should include, end users, product owner, the team that's actually building the app, just so everyone's on the same page, right? I think that's really...
So you've touched on a great point there. I'm a big fan of getting our development team involved in the discovery work. Whereas I think traditionally that work has been left to maybe a project manager and a business analyst. They're the front runners. They go in ahead of the rest of the team to do this preliminary work, and then all the devs and testers and everybody turns up on day one. Whereas I'm like, well, they just miss all the context and they miss all the relationship building and getting to know the organization and its culture if they're excluded until day one. And so it is a bit more expensive. So I like to keep that discovery phase quite short, but I like to get everybody on board for it rather than defer the start until later on.
But it is funny. I mean, it does cost more up front to include them, but I feel like what is the cost further on when you got Chinese whispers and they don't understand the requirements, and then they build something that's wrong because they haven't had that background context.
Yep.
So I do feel like that. I don't know, it's a really hard argument to have, but I do feel like it's a bit flawed that it costs, it's an expensive discovery. I mean, one other thing I quite like also is, in getting developers involved in this, is do like a day in the life of. So go and see the end users doing whatever they're doing in the real world, and see their pain points, those sorts of things, whether it's they're upgrading to a different system or they're doing things manually on pen and paper. The insights you get out of those are incredible, right? And I think that's such a valuable thing to again do as part of your sprint zero. So when you go in to start doing your user stories and things, people actually have a better understanding of what they're trying to do to try and help people with.
I remember pitching for a field service implementation at the Queensland, what they call Department of National Parks or State Parks, whatever they call. And I thought, well, as part of our discovery, I'm going to have to go to the Great Barrier Reef and see how your marine park rangers actually do surveys, on the beaches. It just took me a couple of weeks out in the field to gather some real life data, but we didn't win that gig either. But I love the idea, whether it's sitting in a contact center out in the field with our users, meeting their customers, and getting a real sense of how they operate and what the challenges are, and what the systems they use today, what they look like, what equipment they've got, and
especially if it's complex or a completely new, a business area or an industry that you don't know much about as a consultant. I think it's super important. I just recently was in the Ministry of Justice project here in New Zealand, and we got to go into the courts and sit in a live court, and it's a whole different world if you're not used to it. And so it was very eye-opening to be able to go in and sit there and see what they do. And
so we're just about to start a big correspondence piece. So we're going to replacing some big mail engines and things for one of our customers. And the team actually went down into the mailroom to see these big print machines and all the sorters and folders and envelope stuffers and how the things have to get arranged by the postcode or whatever for the mail sorting. And it's you get a real appreciation for the scale. Like, I don't think mail merge is going to be the right answer here. It's going to be a bit more than that. Yep. So get a real sense of what goes on in the actual operations. So that's great. So we've got a goal setting session with the project sponsor and a team. I love that idea. We've got maybe some day in the life work as well. A couple of great tools. Something I came across recently, I'd love to pick your brains on, is this idea of running a design sprint. The word sprint can be a little confusing in there because it's kind of borrowing from extreme programming and Scrum, this idea of having a short iteration. But I think it's only meant to be 5 days now. Is that right?
Yeah, 1 week. It's five days. I think it's a 5-day sprint, and each day you do something different. But the whole idea behind it is that you start at the start of the week, we identify a problem, and it's usually for something that on a project is going to be really, really tricky to implement. You just really don't know where to start. And so you go through each day, you do something different. So the first day is around kind of defining what the problem is. Second day is coming up with heaps of different ideas. Third day is you just kind of sketch it and get visual and do some design thinking stuff. And you choose some prototypes to build, and you build some prototypes. And then the final couple of days are testing that with real users. So you go build something, and it's quite good, obviously, for the Power Platform or Dynamics. If you get a day to build something for the team, you can probably build something quite quickly, right? And then test it on the last day, and then you'll get feedback on whether or not is this actually going to work. And so I think it's really good in terms of if you've got a really tricky problem that you're not sure how to tackle, within a week you can be a lot more certain whether or not should you progress with this, or is there something else you need to do. You could even use it even like a mid-project, right? So if you're running a really large project that goes for a few years and you've just got this really tricky problem in the middle, let's run a design sprint and we just tackle it together for a week, because some of those problems go on for months and months, those large projects, right?
Yeah. So, I never thought about using it mid-project. That's a great idea.
Yeah. So it's a funny little concept though, because it's 5 dedicated days, and it's very rare that you can get a client, because I think the first 3 days are very much with the client as well. So it's very involved, and it's very hard to get those 3 days of time. So a lot of what I do is actually just take bits of the design sprint and then run them as different workshops,
Okay.
throughout a project. Because there are lots of some awesome workshops in there for different, for how to prototype, how to find out what the problem is, those sorts of things. So there's lots of good little exercises, and you don't have to do them all as a sprint, I don't think.
Yeah, because I remember thinking when I read about design sprint, especially that day one, trying to define the problem that we're going to solve. I remember thinking back to some of your designing business applications workshops about how might we questions. And I think those are some great techniques that I would use in that kind of workshop. So I can see how you would take that design thinking concept, but spread it out over a couple of weeks, just to give everyone a bit more breathing room.
And we've done like shorter versions of like a 2-day, shorten it right down to 2 days and just go healthily for 2 days, because you're time bound to this, right? And you've literally just got to go from one exercise to the next. And so you're forced not to rush through it, but you've got lots of constraints in terms of time.
Yeah.
So you've just got to almost kind of go with your gut feeling around what is the right next decision. I think it's a great concept. It's about people coming together, and you very quickly use everyone's knowledge and expertise and skills to find the problem, and then go away and solve that problem.
Yeah. I didn't think about shrinking it. That's a really great idea, because I want to use it in a sales engagement. We've got an app for managing complaints in financial services. It's a regulated process, but different financial services organizations have issues or challenges at different parts of the process. And so I was thinking, well, I would love to demonstrate to them that this app could solve their challenge with a 5-day design sprint, but it's a big commitment from them. We'd have to charge for it. It's tens of thousands of dollars, flying a team down for a week. It gets really expensive. And like you said, customers very rarely have a group of people who they can dedicate to, a new initiative like this for 5 whole days. But 2 days, that's pretty feasible. So we could do let's define the problem. Let's come up with some solutions in day 1. Day 2 in the morning might be configuring the prototype to demonstrate whether it can solve those problems. And then at the end of the day, giving that back to the users, let them try it and give us their feedback.
There's different ways of doing it. I've even seen where you spend the first 2 days with the client, where you do what is the problem, and then brainstorm the ideas, and then the third day you go away, or fourth day you go away and prototype just yourself and the project team, and then you come back again. Yeah. Or you could have a few days break and come back the next week. There's different ways you can skin it. Yeah. Cool. But if you're doing the true design sprint, it's 5 days all in one go.
Yeah. So Danny Cahill is a big fan of prototypes and proof of concepts in his build up to launching a project. I've used them in pre-sales, but once the customers said go, yes, let's implement this thing, I very rarely build prototypes after that. Other kind of artifacts that we do find a lot of value in, one would be some customer journey maps or user journey maps. Do you distinguish between those two? Are they completely different artifacts trying to express different ideas?
So a user journey map and a customer one? Yeah, I do distinguish between them, because I think a customer journey map is typically the same journey, where it's it's the consider, buy and use. So it's how do I find out about the product or service? How do I buy it, and how do I use it? So that's the kind of the customer journey. And then a user journey I find is more internal, and it could be anything, right? It could be, this is the customer service journey for the customer service rep. Right. This is the sales journey for the sales user. It's always from someone on the internal side. That's how I think about it.
And so I might pick one or both of those tools, depending on what we're trying to achieve. So those have been great artifacts. Again, probably not redesigning everything but at this stage, but we're getting lots of context. We're sitting with the users, we're finding out what their challenges are, what systems they use today, what the pain points are, what the opportunities to delight them or their customers are. Those are great.
It's a great tool. I find it's a great tool for when you go away and you do the day in the life of, and you go and observe the people doing whatever they do in their day job. It's a good tool for them to go away and to write down everything you observed and put it on a user journey map, and then play that back to the client and go, okay, well, what have we missed? What did we not see on the day? So it's quite a good way of reflecting and kind of consolidating all that knowledge you've got in a visual, rather than writing a big document.
Great. So there's a couple of good tools in our toolkit. A user story map I love as a way of creating the initial product backlog. We start with epics and features. I know that Patton, who devised user story maps, doesn't like the agile epics and stories and features jargon, but I find it pretty useful because we're going to translate it into a product backlog. But we've got this spine that goes across the organization or follows the business process of the customer journey, and then things hang off that. And what I love about it is when customers see all of the big requirements on a map, and then they can slice them into priorities. So this is going to be top priority or release 1, perhaps, whatever you want to think about, MVP maybe. And this is going to be release 2, this is going to be release 3. And they begin to get a sense of what's in scope for the first release and what's out of scope, what's coming later. And if you have those epics assigned to either persona or departments, they can see who's going to be delighted with the scope of phase 1 and who's been left out. And so you get that agreement, I hope, from all the stakeholders that, okay, my requirements are going to come in release 3 and I'm going to have to take a back seat for a couple of months.
Yeah. I I haven't done much with user story maps, but I did after you came onto my course, and because I did a slightly different way. You saw this reminds me of user story map, and I looked at it and I'm like, there is I think as part of my process that I have, I think there is a bit of a gap, but there is a place for user story maps. As you say, it's just a different cut of the information, but be able to, for a client to be able to see, these are my releases and this is who's impacted. Very clear way of mapping them out, and then again seeing if you've got any gaps in your if your process end to end, you can quite easily identify well, hey, we're going to miss something, or if you put something in one release that's dependent on another release. Yes. I'm a big fan of Miro. Have you used? What tool do you use for your mapping for user story maps? Because there is a tool in there I've been playing around with.
I don't use Miro. I'll tell you why in a moment. I've used a tool called Stories on Board for a couple of years, and my subscription elapsed since the last time I drew a user story map. So recently I had to do one for an internal product that we're building, and I want a user story mapping tool that integrates with Azure DevOps so that I can build this thing out and then press a button, and all those cards that we've laid out visually get translated into product backlog items in Azure DevOps. Ideally, if I can estimate them in the story mapping tool and the estimates flow across as well, that'd be great. And I found one. It's called Avion, I think. And one of the founders of Avion is going to be coming onto the show in a couple of weeks to discuss my early impressions and user story mapping in a bit more detail. So look out for that one. So I'm giving that one an evaluation at the moment, and so far it's really good. It's a pure play user story mapping tool. It happens to integrate with Azure DevOps or with Jira, which I don't think is true of Miro, unless I've missed something. But Miro and other of these leading edge modern whiteboarding tools just don't have that integration into the backlog management tool.
Yeah, that's why I do a lot of kind of double handling, right? I use Miro to visualize everything, and then it's manually updating. Yeah. But they are, I have noticed recently, they are bringing out, and they're always changing the platform, right? Yeah. And there is now tighter integration with Jira and Azure DevOps. Okay. But it's all in kind of a beta mode at the moment. But it's super interesting because you got your user story map, and you can drag the cards around. Miro also has, they just brought in estimation poker as well, which I think you'd probably quite like, where the team can drop like a card or a tile onto the thing, and they vote on how many story points I think it is.
Very good.
There's some cool things coming out in it, all kind of in beta at the moment, but I'll keep you posted.
Yeah. I remember chatting to the team at Stories on Board because they wanted to know how they could enhance the product. What I would love as a service provider, as a Microsoft partner, is when I build those estimates, I then want to say, right, in order to deliver that work, here's the team that I'm going to have. And so behind the scenes somewhere, I build a little team profile. So here's the different resources, here's their rates, here's therefore the cost. And then it can flip between story points and dollars, or whatever currency you're using. And then also, if I give it a velocity, so we estimate our velocity to be 40 points per 2-week sprint, it can go, okay, well, this release has got 1,000 points in it. So therefore, it's going to take this number of weeks or this number of sprints, and it's going to cost this amount of money. And so you can have a column of user stories all add up to the cost for an entire feature, and then roll up to the epic level, and then even roll up to the persona. So, the director of customer service is getting 400 story points in the first release, and it's going to cost them, $25,000. And that ability to translate story points into time and into money based on a couple of formulas that you set up in the background, that would be awesome. But I haven't seen a tool do all of that quite yet. We'll keep pushing them.
Yeah, that does sound pretty good though, doesn't it?
So what else do you like to create to help people visualize and get the context and have a great day one, sprint one? We talked about a couple. What else do you have in your arsenal?
The other thing I do like to do, I'm a big fan of prototyping. Like I do like to have some sort of visual, right? And you can have I think the user journey maps are a really good and simple one. But the clients want to see, well, what does this kind of look like? I'm a big fan of model-driven apps. I'll probably always start there, right? Because you just configure something really easily, show the client, and then I'll actually do things, if it gets a bit more complicated, and do things like take a screenshot of the model-driven app, dump it into Miro, and then just there's little tools in Miro or Figma or whatever you want to use where you can kind of modify the user interface pretty quickly. I typically probably wouldn't do that in Discovery though, unless really needed to and they really wanted to visualize it. There's probably more tools for, when we're going through design, we're starting to flesh that out with them.
A couple of customers have asked us to create a solution blueprint following the Microsoft Success by Design approach. I can see why customers want that. So if Microsoft says, here's a recommended practice, customers might expect Microsoft partners to follow it. My overall impression of Success by Design is that it's mostly with ERP projects in mind, and it's mostly with traditional approaches in mind. You can use it with CRM, of course, you can use it with other things. It's not really built with Power Apps in mind. It's really a Dynamics 365 focused implementation approach. And you can use it with an Agile approach. But the templates that I've seen for the solution blueprint are pretty weak. Here's a PowerPoint version of the Success by Design solution blueprint. Here's a template, and it's 25 slides with a heading on each slide, and that's it. I'd like a little bit more guidance there about what should be in that document or that artifact. I don't want to go so far as the old, what was it called? The Dynamics. Sure Step. Wow, do you remember all the templates and things? I mean, it was very prescriptive.
Yeah, I know, it's crazy. I used to fill those out.
That was probably a bit too far. But with this one artifact, I would love some great examples to come out from Fast Track about what a good solution blueprint would look like. Because I think it's a reasonable request. And I love the way it does cover a breadth of topics like data migration and integration and risk management and things that we haven't discussed in any of the artifacts we just talked about. Yeah. Have you seen a good solution blueprint used well?
I definitely agree that the blueprint is a little bit, it would definitely have some examples, right, of how to fill it out. The slides are a little bit, and the slide deck are a little bit light on detail. And what I've kind of tried to be doing is when I'm doing my stuff on Miro with a user journey map, or there's a few other kind of artifacts that I have in Miro when I'm building up a design, and then I've now got a system where I just, I'll copy and paste that and put that into the social process. There's bits like the business process diagrams, who the stakeholders are, those types of things map across quite easily. And then the business context around the problem and stuff, that's quite easy to do. But when you get down to things like the security slide, I'm like, where do you even start with this? It's so big.
Yeah.
And that in itself can be a bit of a minefield. Would you usually do a solution blueprint as part of Sprint Zero here? Would you do that all in Sprint Zero, or would that be a bit of a longer discovery for you?
Oh, good question. So we're just about to kick off a new project in a couple of weeks' time, and the customers asked for a solution blueprint. So first of all, we proposed a 2-sprint discovery with the full team. And they're like, mostly because of stakeholder availability, we can't go that quickly for those 4 weeks. We can't go that intensely over that period. Our stakeholders aren't available at the capacity you might need them. So let's stretch it out over 4 sprints, 8 weeks. One of the artifacts we'd like you to create, because we're going to get audited by a third-party assessment team who suggested we create this solution blueprint. So fine, we'll create it. Our guidance was, I don't think it'll be finished by the start of sprint 1. Typically, there'll be some unanswered questions. It might take a bit longer. No, they're fine with that. So we're going to have the first draft or 80% of it done before the start of sprint 1 with some bits to fill in. A bit like the test plan will also probably take a bit longer. It doesn't need to be done right on sprint 1. However, this customer who's asked us to stretch out the discovery also said we don't have any budget to do that. So we're going to take the initial budget for discovery and just stretch it out. So half of your team are going to have to sit it out. And then we get back to that first problem of the developers who join later are going to miss all that context and have to go off documentation and secondhand stories. And, and the people who were there for the discovery are going to have to spend a lot of their time explaining it to the developers. So like you said, you lose out in the end. It doesn't really save you anything.
Yeah. What I do like about the solution blueprint is that even though it's very high level, it's quite a good, I guess, a checklist. And I like, especially when you get around to the training and the training strategy and the user adoption strategy, it's like, well, who, between you and I, clients and the vendor, who's responsible for all of this? And then that can create some quite good discussions before you start going into that. So I like the framework around it, but as you say, some detail would be quite nice.
That's a great point, because as a vendor, you're often asked, what are your assumptions? Or, in your proposal, please state all the assumptions that you've made. And we try and do a good job of comprehensively stating all of our assumptions, but we might forget, like, who's responsible for training? And if you haven't called that out and the customer has assumed you're doing it and you've assumed they're doing it, then the solution blueprint, when you get to that, so whatever it is, slide 17, and you have to go discuss your approach to user training, then that assumption rears its head. So like you said, it's a great checklist for, have I covered all the big components of an implementation and all the big assumptions that normally get missed. Anything else that you really love having? For example, how much of a backlog would you like to see built out? Do you like to have sufficient product backlog items detailed out to keep the developers going for 3 or 4 sprints? Or is it enough just to have 1 sprint's worth of work? Or how far in advance of the developers do you like to have the user stories ready to go?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I guess I don't do like heaps of like really true, and everyone does like a hybrid agile type scenario, right? So,
Hamish, you're breaking my heart.
I think obviously you probably want some.
What are you talking about?
I'm giving you a heart attack here. And this is not through my choice, right? It's more the clients that I work with or the other people I'm partnering with on projects. I think ideally you have some work or something to do in that first sprint for the team. And whether that's, got some spikes or something to investigate, or maybe it's configuring the data model that, the components that, or something like that, have some of the basics. So, I don't really have a rule of thumb for how much, but it's kind of keeping with the theme of Agile, right? Just kind of do just as much as you kind of need to in time, right? Because the more you plan in advance,
the less agile you are.
Probably going to be wrong, right? So it's not agile; it becomes still hybrid.
We quite often struggle at the start of a project to get a sufficient backlog detailed, ready to start development. So we're quite often running to catch up, and the devs are like, "What's next? What's next? Give me some more work to do." And the analysts are running at 1,000,000 miles an hour to try and refine the backlog. But I think 1 sprint, maybe 2 is sufficient. If we had that every time, we'd be pretty lucky. But 3 or 4, I think, is excessive. To your point, it's there's too much change and reprioritization and feedback. Can just send you off in quite a different direction in those early sprints.
And would you, in terms of the environment set up in your pipelines and all those sorts of things, you'd do that as sprint 0?
We try and do that during the discovery phase before we turn up. Again, it depends on who's turning up for that discovery phase. If the developers are sitting it out, then we have to do it in sprint 1. But it's great prep work to do. I don't think setting up an environment is a user story. The users don't care about environments, unless you're following a very prescriptive governance process where somebody in IT is a stakeholder who says, these are the environments I need set up. Typically, it's more of a chore. that the dev team are recommending. Here, we're going to set up these 4 environments for this project. So yeah, we try and do that before day 1, sprint 1, but yeah, not always. Business process maps. You touched on that earlier. Are you still a big fan of business process mapping or modeling, right? Depending on your lingo.
Yeah. No, I am. I kind of go quite early straight into business process mapping. But what I find is that you kind of get stuck in the weeds a bit, and you can get quite stuck on the details of that business process map, and then you don't make progress. So this is why I'm really liking looking at user story mapping, because it brings it up to another level, right? Yeah. And then I do think there is a need for, especially for complex processes. I think it definitely is, for if you've got a condition, if this, then that, or whatever, and it's really complex, I think it's they're really useful there. I do quite like having a business process map, and then having either, if you're building, you have the screenshots of the app or whatever, or if you're still kind of designing, maybe a wireframe or whatever aligned with that stage in the app, that stage in the process, sorry, so that when you go and look at the board or the process map, you see the map, and then you'll have the screenshots of the app above it, and so the user can say, well, when I'm in this stage of the process, I'm using this part of the app. So they can help. I use it as a visualization tool, and then that, as we kind of go through the projects, and you're refining requirements as you're building it out as well, just constantly updating. My business project kind of becomes like the master place to go to then discuss. So you visualize requirements first, and then you may go into ADO to discuss, as your DevOps, to discuss the details behind the scenes. So that's how I do it, at the moment. But it's always, you learn new things from different people, so it's always changing.
Yeah, I like that idea of attaching screenshots to points in the process. If you have a prototype or a wireframe ready to go, and drop it in there, that's a great idea. I used to spend a lot of time on projects when I was a young kid, as a business analyst, documenting as-is processes and then to-be processes. Less and less value in that these days. Sketching out the to-be process is still sometimes valuable, but trying to capture all the detail of how things are done today, don't see many customers investing in that work. They may already have, if they're a really mature organization that might have some business process catalog and all that stuff is already there, ready to go.
No, I'll use the user journey map to describe the current state, and that makes it high level, right? And you don't get stuck in the weeds. And then, I hardly, unless it's a really, really complex process, you may do a current state. But yeah, I'm with you. I don't think it's worth it most of the time.
Awesome. So we've got, 10 great ideas there for things that teams can deliver before they start on day 1 of a new delivery phase of a project. Hamish, have we missed anything out, or do you think that's sufficient to get everybody going?
I think it's pretty good. The other thing I would say, I guess ahead of all these things, is I'm a big fan of a stakeholder map. So who are the people in the organization, and who is the sponsor, who's the business owner, but also important, who are the end users, who are they, and are they included in our workshops and the stuff we're doing for the discovery? I'm a big fan of that. So I think it's almost one of the first things you do is you identify who do you need in these sessions as part of your discovery is really, really important. Make sure you're not missing anyone out.
It's quite rare in an RFP you receive from a customer and they say, here's our team. And they always want to know the supplier's team. Yeah. It gives all the experience and their CVs and everything else. But I love it. I love it when a customer says, here's our team. They don't have to name names, but when they give you a sense of job titles, and we've got a change manager, we've got a project manager, we've got a business analyst. Wow, okay, great. They are invested in this. They're ready to go. They've allocated resources to it. That's a brilliant sign. Very few customers ever do that, but I'd love to see more. Even once they sign off and you get going, you go, can we develop a stakeholder map? There's some reluctance there. Like, well, I can't give you just our org chart and people's email addresses. Who knows what could happen. Do you ever see people reluctant to work on a stakeholder map with you?
Not often. We often just say they don't have something like that prepared, right? And so I think it's important to understand who's on their project team, but also like, I'm really keen to understand who are the end users in the organization,
Yeah.
who are their managers, how does all the, because in terms of the reporting, we talk about success metrics, right? How does that all work? I find, it's understanding how all the people in the organization work together can have quite a big impact on the project, right? In terms of what you build out and decisions you make, the goals you set. I think it's really important to understand all that. And often we don't get given any of that. And you say they're reluctant to give an org chart. Usually if I do a stakeholder map with the client, it'll be just with one person, so the project manager or the product owner or whatever. But you don't make it as a project artifact. It's just something for your team internally to process. Because I also like to kind of identify, who's someone we really need to keep on our side, or kind of get those little insights of how to work best with this person. Who do we need? Who's anti this project? How do we get them on board? I like having those sorts of discussions because it helps, just bring that up. So typically you don't want to have that in a document anywhere. It's a bit of a side conversation with someone friendly on the client side.
Yeah, maybe I've approached it as, let's run a workshop to do stakeholder mapping, and maybe there is too sensitive. Maybe it is best handled in a one-on-one conversation. Right, you pull up the org chart, I'll ask you some questions about who's who, I'll make a couple of private notes. It's not going to go any further. I appreciate it's sensitive and in some cases confidential. So if I approach it that way, maybe use my best Kiwi accent, I'll have more success in the future. Great. Hamish, we're going to have to wrap it there. It's great to catch up with you. I will see you in a few weeks' time in Redmond. Looking forward to that, my friend. It's going to be awesome.
Yeah, definitely looking forward to it. Yeah, you see you in person again. It's been a few years, so looking forward to it.
All right.
And thanks for to chat today. It's been really good to talk through this.
You too. Thanks, Hamish.
You always got good things to share.
Cheers.
All right, thanks, Neil.
Thanks, Hamish, for joining me again on Amazing Apps. You'll find links to Hamish's LinkedIn profile in the episode description, as well as his consultancy, App Rising, and his Designing Business Applications training program. I hope you enjoyed our conversation and learned something from it as well. Here are a few of my key takeaways. Number one is goal setting, something I need to help our customers do a better job of. Let's clearly describe and broadcast the goals of the new application we're building so everyone knows how we're going to measure success. Two was the day in the life sessions. They're a valuable way of gaining understanding and getting empathy with our users' current situation. Number three, design sprints don't have to be 5 contiguous days. I'm going to take Hamish's suggestion and try experimenting with 2-day design sprints. Number four, the solution blueprint from Microsoft's Success by Design Guide is a great checklist. We'd love to see some better templates and examples. So if you've got any or you've seen any, please share them. Number five, to-be process maps are valuable, but as is process maps, probably not worth the effort in most situations. Number six, lastly, I need to do a better job of stakeholder mapping with my customers in order to understand all the users, the stakeholders, and the influencers involved in our project and involved in our application. Let me know your key takeaways or your favorite discovery activity or artifact in the comments below. You never know, you could find yourself on a future Amazing Apps episode, sharing it with the rest of the audience. Until next time, keep experimenting. Let me know your key takeaways or your favorite discovery activity or artifact in the comments on the customary company page on LinkedIn. You never know, you could find yourself on a future episode sharing it with the rest of the Amazing Apps audience. Until next time, keep experimenting.